Dear participants and presenters for this session on skills for the 21st century. I welcome you to this session. We have with us three presenters for this session. The first one is Dr. Henrika Jansson. She is a technical advisor on the violence against women in the United Nations UNFPA, United Nations Program of. We have second presenter, Miss Christine Deemer. She is from the University of Melbourne, Australia. And we have Miss Lian Lai. She is from the National Bureau of Statistics. Before we start the presentation by each of these presenters, let us keep in mind that all of you keep your mics on mute and keep on writing your questions on the chat so that we can keep them ready for response by each of the presenters. The whole session will be divided into two parts. The first part, we will be going by the presentations of the three presenters, and the second part would be a panel discussion on some questions relating to the training on capacity building related issues. But before we start the session, I am the director of the Statistical Institute for Asia and the Pacific, and I will show you that these are the three papers which are being presented in this session. Before we start the whole discussion, I'll request, you may be aware, and many of you must have been the alumni of this Statistical Institute for Asia and the Pacific as a UN ESCAP body, which has been serving this region for the last 50 years by providing training, statistical training to the personnel in the governments. The present focus of this institute is on the developing skills for the monitoring of the SDGs. It is also training people, training officers on various statistical advanced techniques and use of big data for official statistics. Before we proceed further, I'll request our colleague who is a partner in our discussion, Mr. Jan Smith. He is the regional advisor in the ESCAP Statistics Division, to show a small video on the SIAP's activities and the future plans. Jan Smith, please.
Show us the world as it really is. In Asia and the Pacific, statistics show our region is home to more than 2/3 of the world's population, 60% of its young people, and generates 60% of global economic growth. Statistics provide the narrative behind the region's
Jan, there is no sound to the video. We don't hear anything. Jan, there is no sound. There was sound in the beginning. No sound still. Maybe share the link.
Jan, should we leave this now at the moment? Because we are not hearing anything.
Region, there have been countless success stories.
In Malaysia, we have much benefited from UN SIAP programs in uplifting statistician competency to realize the Global Agenda 2030.
SIAP has played a significant role in promoting and advancing official statistics in Mongolia by developing our professional skills and also providing the opportunity to network with statisticians of Asia Pacific and beyond.
Going forward, the Institute will continue to develop innovative, trusted and timely statistical services as for this decade of action and sustainable development. We plan to do this by focusing on 3 priority areas. 1. We will assist governments to track the progress of implementing the SDGs, strengthening their accountability and ensuring decisions are evidence-based. 2. We will reach out to all countries and regions, so statistical knowledge is available to everyone. And 3. We will train to capture data from the digitization of activities, adapting statistical analysis to digital trends, technology.
Over the past 50 years, the Statistical Institute for Asia and the Pacific has become the region's premier training institution for official statistics. We look forward to providing this essential service for another half century and beyond.
Thank you, Jan. Now I will briefly take a small presentation.
We're going to stop sharing.
Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is it in the slideshow mode now? Right.
Yes.
Okay. This is a small outline what I'll be covering during this presentation. I'll try to be brief because we have lost some time. We are basically talking of what are the traditional skills of national statistical offices in the systems, what kind of changes are required, and how the NSS should get adapted to these changes, and what we are looking forward in the skills for the 21st century. You know the traditional skills, all of you have been associated with the national statistical offices and the systems. Primarily, we were on the censuses and surveys, conducting censuses and surveys, and they required specific skills in terms of designing questionnaires, schedules, eliciting accurate information from interviewees, developing sampling designs, processing and analysis of data, and release of results. Later, also we have issues relating to the national accounts for macroeconomic aggregates, human development indicators, and many other statistical methodologies which have been developed. And this is what the primary skill which national statistical offices and the systems have had for the planning and policy and decision making. The situation has changed. There has been a vast change in the technological development and use of this technology in the statistics, in the national statistical office's work. There's expanding digitization, an expansion of internet. This has had a major impact on the work in which the statistics organizations are organized or deliver their products. The distinction which used to be there between the producer and the user, that has blurred. Now we have private organizations, civil society organizations, and private researchers even. They are collecting, compiling, analyzing, and disseminating information. Now the role NSO has to think and change. NSO has to adapt to this change because demands from the policy makers have been increasing. There's a huge demand from the policy makers, and they want information immediately. Not in those days earlier when we used to conduct censuses and surveys. Years and years we used to do the processing and then bring out the results. And this demand is not only from the policymakers, but from a larger domain of people, citizens, and media who want to know more and more statistical information. Now, adaptation has to be at different levels in the national statistical system. The whole of organization and the system level changes, that is one, and then the individual level changes. Now, system and organization level changes include coordination. A primary responsibility as data stewardship, what is being called, is the responsibility of the national statistical system to have a better coordination with all the ministries, departments who are generating a lot of statistics through their administrative processes, private sector, and the civil society organizations. And this requires a lot of legal framework or reworking of the legal framework for the national statistical systems. Planning, a different type of planning is needed. Now it is not only the generation of statistics, but it is far better a coordination. And also additional resource generation. And that is what always the problem of the national statistical system has been. And therefore you need a strategic planning, some better coordination. And the critical element is the human resource management, because the needs are changing and human resource have become a very important area where we have to look at. Now, what we are seeing at the individual level, it is the quantitative skills and the data scientist skills are more needed at present, apart from what we have been having all along as a statistician. Big data is coming, artificial intelligence is to be used, and other forms of developments which are taking place in the information technology. Because good coordination is required, you need good communication skills, you need better negotiation skills, and better leadership skills in the national statistical systems. And we have to work in different teams. with different specializations. And therefore, we, in the 21st century, what we are looking for, having skills for monitoring national development plans, SDGs. There are a number of indicators on which the data is not available. Data disaggregation is not possible at times. So these are the areas which we have to focus. Skills for modernization of the whole of statistical business processes. It can be through CAPI. All of you must have heard it, if not used it. And then bringing more and more data in the public domain. Provide a metadata, provide a lot of analysis, and allow it to be accessed to the internet. Then there is a need for using more and more administrative data and various alternative sources of data. These skills are required, which we will call it big data. And this alternative data sources are of different kinds. It can be a satellite imagery data. It can be mobile phone data. It can be a digital data from the internet, etc. So this is what has to be changed. So transformation has to take place from the traditional NSO to a modernized addressing to the current situation. This is a brief description of whatever I have said, and there it brings out what kind of data and what kind of national statistical systems we'll have to look forward. Thank you. Now, having done my bit about skills which we are talking today, now I will be requesting Dr. Henrika Jansen, the technical advisor from the UNFPA, to give her presentation, and she will be giving it in 10 minutes time. Thank you.
Dr. Senset, can you turn on your mic, please? You are on mute.
Thank you. Did you see my screen?
Yes, I can see.
Okay. Thank you for the warning. And thank you for Ashish for introducing me, and good morning everybody wherever you are. It's such an honor to participate in the ESCAP Statistics Week. And I like to start with a statistic. Global estimates suggest that on average 1 in 3 women worldwide have experienced physical and/or sexual violence in their lifetime. And that's most often at the hands of an intimate partner. In the Asia Pacific region, there are countries where this proportion is even 2 out of every 3 women. And having national level data about the prevalence of violence against women is the first step to understanding how to end it. And there's a growing demand for this data, since countries are required to measure progress towards ending all forms of violence against women and girls as part of their commitments to the Sustainable Development Goals. And because of the sensitivity and stigma around the topic and the safety risk for participants, special approaches and skill sets are required to measure violence against women. And these skill sets are still scarce. And to address this gap in technical capacities for violence against women data collection, the No Violence Against Women Data, or people say kNOwVAWdata initiative, was initiated in UNFPA in 2016. You see the logo on the top of my screen. And this is an initiative that's supported by Australia. And I'm the technical lead of the initiative in the UNFPA office. And Kristen, in her talk after mine, will talk more about the initiative itself. But I today will talk about the 6 golden principles and skills for interviewing women on sensitive topics, and in our case, it's around violence against women. And these principles are empathy and maturity, sensitization, confidentiality and safety, minimizing distress and providing information on support, reaching the unreachable, and taking care of the interviewer's own well-being. And I will illustrate these principles with some examples from violence against women surveys conducted in the region, mainly from Palau and Mongolia. But these principles have been applied to dozens of other surveys in the Asia-Pacific region. So let's start with the first principle, empathy and maturity. We know from many surveys that approximately half of the women who have experienced violence have never disclosed this to anyone before the interview. So interviewers should be selected for empathy and maturity, and they should be given training so that they can establish bonds with service respondents to get these secret sensitive stories. An example, in the Palau 2014 Family Health and Safety Study, and also in other studies, it was quite common for interviewers to get through the entire questionnaire with no report of violence, but at the very end, women would suddenly start talking about their experiences of abuse. So if a woman disclosed violence at this final stage, the interviewer was instructed to go back and to correct the answers previously given if they had consent from the respondent to do so. And as a side note, I mean, this is easy to do with paper questionnaires, but if you have CAPI systems, digital questionnaires, they should be designed to make this possible. Something on sensitization. Sensitizing interviewers includes giving them an understanding of gender-based violence, its dynamics, causes, impact on health and well-being. And with a deeper understanding of these issues, interviewers will also be able to confront and work with their own biases and prejudices. A judgmental interviewer, one who has attitudes of victim blaming, will not get honest disclosure. And I want to give the example of Mongolia, who in 2017 embarked on their first ever violence against women prevalence survey. And the National Statistics Office had to really relearn and apply new ways to collect data on this issue. And the interviewer training showed the survey team how to properly talk about gender-based violence in ways that were clear to women and that were sensitive. And if you want to learn more about the Mongolia study, please attend tomorrow's session SA3, because there you will get a lot more about this survey. To sensitize interviewers, they go through many exercises and role plays. For example, in one exercise, interviewers need to imagine a painful or embarrassing experience from their own past. And they need to imagine that the person sitting next to her would inquire her about this experience. And without having to disclose the experience at any time in the training, interviewers will reflect and discuss on how this thought exercise changes their approach to interviewing. On confidentiality and safety, an example. Survey respondents are often afraid to speak out because they fear more violence if their spouse or boyfriend finds out that she has been participating in a survey. So it's absolutely essential that interviewers take utmost care to ensure that nobody in the household or community learns about the survey's real topic. So interviewers will thus use a safe name to describe, to frame the study in a way that doesn't reveal it's about violence. And that's not only in the community or in the household, but also when talking to their own friends and relatives. And this quote refers to a Palau interviewer, and the coordinator told us that co-workers of this interviewer were sort of interrogating that interviewer about the survey topic. So she made up stories like, it's about women's health and menstruation. And after that, people said, oh, okay, we don't want to hear about it. And role-playing was one of the biggest tools that helped us. On minimizing distress and providing support information. Enumerators or interviewers should develop skills to be aware of possible distress during the interview, and they should know how to respond if a woman withdraws into herself or gets upset. And some strategies include taking time to listen attentively and be quiet. She can make sympathetic comments such as, "I know this is difficult," or she could simply offer tissues or offer a break. And in this quote from Vietnam, this is how an interviewer told us afterwards: "When I encountered a case of abuse, sometimes I feel tense and end up stopping the interview to invite the woman to take some water, give her a tissue, and at the same time, take a sip of water myself to restore my own psychological balance." So interviewers need to be empathetic, supportive, but they cannot take on the roles of counselors, and that's important. But instead, at the end of the interview, they must provide all respondents with a list of locally available support services, and they should be trained to refer women who are in danger or who request assistance or otherwise. They need to be able to refer them to these services. In a violence against women survey, only one woman per household can be interviewed, and that's for safety and confidentiality reasons. And that one woman is randomly selected, and the selected woman cannot be replaced. And we teach interviewers to make every effort to locate this originally selected respondent and talk to her in private. And we have noticed many times that women who are reluctant to participate or who are hardest to find, they are most likely to be survivors of violence. So not doing everything to find them will result in a biased sample and in an underestimation of violence, and that can jeopardize the importance of the issue. So on the last point on well-being, interviewers are in the field because they care about the issue and they care about better data. And better data is collected by people who are emotionally well and who do know how to take care of themselves. So there should be opportunities for relaxation, debriefing and counseling, and also you should give them breaks, time off. And for example, in Palau, the interviewers were offered one-on-one, small group and full team debriefing sessions. And there was also a professional counselor available for the interviewers. But most interviewers actually in Palau found that just talking to each other was most beneficial. So doing surveys this way is complex and expensive, but evidence does show that survey interviewers who are not experienced but who take part in an intensive training, they get better response rates, better disclosure rates, and more respondent satisfaction compared to professional survey interviewers who have not been thoroughly trained on violence against women surveys and these golden principles from in this presentation. So the good news is that these principles are increasingly embedded in survey planning processes throughout Asia and the Pacific, thanks to the kNOwVAWdata initiative. And I really think that the best interviewers are those that can see interviewing as an exchange of gifts. Interviewers give their empathy, their compassion, their hearts to women who are desperate in need of a listening ear, and women then in exchange give their most secret and painful stories, and that's the data that we need to find out how often violence happens. So time and again we do hear that women feel valued and they find being listened to as something very beneficiary. Also, it's important to remember that even with the soundest violence against women surveys, they only reflect what are women willing to disclose to interviewers. And you can be sure that you don't get everything. You never get the worst cases. The women who have been murdered, the women who live in institutions, who fled their homes because of the violence, who are incapacitated, who are locked up, who are too afraid to open doors. So it should be fully understood that you never get the worst when you interpret your prevalence data, because what we see in violence against women surveys is actually always an underestimation. So this is just a short taste. I hear music, but this is just a short taste of what I wanted to say about the topic. And our website has plenty of resources, including a fact sheet on these 6 golden principles, but also on methodologies, data visualizations, reports, and so on. Please do take a look. And also follow us on social media for the latest updates, including some useful products that we are developing to guide violence against women data efforts during COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jensen, for very insightful description of how the interviews, especially in such a sensitive issue, have to be conducted. What are the critical issues which people should keep in mind? Yeah, this is very, very useful, and it's quite elucidating how much effort goes to collect information about issues like women's violence against women. Now I'll request Ms. Christine Deemer to make her presentation. Again, she is requested to complete it within 10 minutes. I will give us music in the meantime if that is required. Thank you so much.
Great. Can I just check that my slide is showing or my presentation is showing?
Yes.
Yes, it is showing very well. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's very exciting to be part of this ESCAP conference, online conference. Very pleased to be here with all of you. Violence against women has become an urgent priority for governments around the world. It's increasingly seen as a detrimental public health and human rights epidemic with both social and economic consequences. Quantifying and understanding exactly how violence against women manifests in countries is difficult. The only way to understand the full scale and magnitude of the problem is through prevalence surveys. Today, I'll talk about an initiative I'm involved in called the kNOwVAWdata course, or the kNOwVAWdata initiative, which is working to improve the technical ability for countries throughout the Asia-Pacific region to measure accurate, reliable, and comparable violence against women prevalence through national and subnational surveys. So I know that my session title mentions that this course is for improving the skills of people working in national statistics offices, and that's correct. However, it also extends the knowledge to other partners who work with the national statistics offices. Since the year 2000, 31 countries across Asia and Pacific have already conducted prevalence surveys. These studies have used one of the 2 gold standard methodologies, either the World Health Organization multi-country study on women's health and domestic violence against women, or the domestic violence module of the Demographic and Health Survey. This map shows the prevalence rates of intimate partner violence in countries across the Asia-Pacific region where violence against women has been measured using one of those 2 gold standard methodologies. The orange balls on the map include the prevalence of women who experience partner violence in the last 12 months, and the gray balls are the rates of women reporting partner violence at some point in their life since the age of 15. So you can see there's quite a range of variation between countries and between regions. Looking at the gray balls, we can see that between 15 and 68% of women in the region disclosed experiencing physical and/or sexual violence by an intimate partner at some point in their lives. And by intimate partner, I mean a significant partner like a boyfriend or a husband. The effects of this violence are experienced across the development spectrum, from women's individual health, their capacity to care for children, children's learning activities, ongoing generational cycles of violence, and a family's financial stability. Intimate partner violence also takes an economic toll on the national health, social services, and justice sectors. There's a need for data. Reliable, comparable prevalence data on violence against women are essential to justify, inform, and monitor prevention and response efforts, and tailor these efforts to individual country and subnational contexts. The SDG Target 5.2 and its dedicated indicators on intimate partner violence and sexual violence by perpetrators other than partners has led to an increased demand for violence against women prevalence data. Target 5.2 calls upon countries to eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls in private and public spheres. This includes trafficking, sexual exploitation, and other types of exploitation. To measure progress towards this goal, countries need skills to safely and accurately collect violence against women. And that's partly what Henriette was speaking about. But because of a lack of technical capacity to do so, there remains a substantial lack of ethically collected and statistically sound prevalence data. The kNOwVAWdata initiative and the flagship course, which is the course is what I'm particularly talking about, is working to change that. In fact, the kNOwVAWdata course is working towards a number of development goals directly and indirectly. The United Nations Population Fund, or UNFPA, and the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, also called DFAT, have a long history of support to countries conducting violence against women prevalence studies throughout Asia and the Pacific. Building on this history, and to address the lack of existing data and capacity to measure and analyze violence against women data ethically and soundly, kNOwVAWdata was launched by UNFPA and DFAT in partnership in 2016. There are 4 core pillars of this work. First is the ongoing technical support to countries undertaking violence against women prevalence studies. This includes survey design, implementation, analysis, and use of data for change in policies and programs. Secondly, the UNFPA, University of Melbourne, and the Australian National Research Organisation for Women's Safety, also called NROS, have created an annual course on the measurement of violence against women with DFAT support. The kNOwVAWdata initiative, third, the kNOwVAWdata initiative is through this course, building a robust network of violence against women data experts through partnering, training, and mentoring. And fourth, finally, we are telling the story behind violence against women data, not only about trends and patterns, but also about the data collection process and the lessons learned to help others in planning surveys. As we saw in Henriette's presentation, conducting a violence against women survey isn't like any other kind of research. It requires a robust, nuanced understanding of violence against women, its drivers and consequences, and therefore data planning, collection, analysis, and user skills are very unique to this survey. That's where the kNOwVAWdata course comes in. The landmark course aims to build the skills needed to safely and ethically gather robust and reliable data in difficult and sometimes dangerous conditions without putting either the research participant or the interviewer at risk. The curriculum draws from decades of existing materials and resources developed by global experts. It uses international best practice standards to support learning of complex and complete research, analysis and knowledge translation skills, and the curriculum makes use of the methodologies developed for the World Health Organization multi-country study on women's health and domestic violence, and the domestic violence module of the Demographic and Health Survey. The course supports learners to plan and/or conduct national prevalence surveys appropriately, to analyze quantitative data sets, and increases data literacy, all of which enable proper interpretation and use of data in policy making and program design. The kNOwVAWdata course was piloted in 2018 in Bangkok and Melbourne with 24 participants from 10 different countries. It was run as a full fee course for the first time in 2019 with a strong focus on the Pacific region. Block 1 was held in Fiji and Block 2 in Melbourne. In 2019, we received 85 applications and expressions of interest. In the end, 43 participants from 11 countries were able to participate by securing funding. This included 26 participants who were sponsored by the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So who should attend and who should participate? Even the most experienced researchers may not be aware of the additional safety and ethical issues faced when interviewing women currently experiencing or at risk of violence. Collecting and analyzing this data involves understanding the complexities of women's lives within their specific contexts, nuances that are not apparent without understanding violence against women. So even experienced researchers benefit from the kNOwVAWdata course. It's a case of not knowing what you don't know. Having participants from different organizations from within the same country, such as government, national statistics offices, and civil society agencies, is extremely valuable. As a team, these individuals often represent both producers and users of data and they're working together from the initial planning phase of a survey builds trust in methodology and the results. This collaboration facilitates ethical and safe implementation of the survey and increases data usage. So the course is structured over a 4 weeks face-to-face intensive. It's offered annually through the University of Melbourne, and we're in the process of embedding the course into the curriculum as an ongoing degree, part of an ongoing degree. 2 of the 4 modules are already accredited. The course is delivered as an intensive with 4 modules, each consisting of 5 days. So there's a total of 20 full days of contact. We have a break of at least 8 weeks in between weeks 2 and 3. So that participants can apply the skills they've learned back in their home countries. The length and intensity of the course reflects the seriousness and sensitivity of measuring violence against women and stresses the importance of a thorough grounding in the content. Sessions are adapted to reflect backgrounds, needs, and strengths. For example, if a cohort is particularly interested in measuring violence against women with disabilities, a session may be more heavily dedicated to this. The course combines lectures and exercises to support practical application and knowledge skills learned. And course participants come away having learned about all elements of the study, from planning involving stakeholders, questionnaire adaptation, fieldwork, management, and data collection through analysis to report writing. They come away with a complete study protocol. And the course curriculum was designed using a participatory process, including input from global experts on measuring violence against women. And the course curriculum is available as a standalone open source format for use by other facilitators and trainers. And in fact, we're looking for partners to work with us to duplicate the course in other regions of the world. And finally, we just want to tell you that the course has been proving to be has proven quite successful. Evidence to this has come through 2 independent evaluations, and our pre- and post-knowledge assessments of the participants show that they gain significant overall knowledge related to measuring prevalence of violence against women in safe, ethical, and rigorous ways. So I'd like to thank you all for listening and thinking about this course. And again, follow us on social media, have a look at our websites to learn a little bit more, so you can, if you're interested in analyzing and researching SDG 5. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Steamer. This has been a very interesting offer from you, in fact, for the Statistical Institute for Asia and the Pacific, who is in the process of developing new courses. And this is a very important thing, which is a part of the SDG reporting also, that is the level of violence which takes place, apart from the gender sensitivities. And therefore, I look forward, and it's very encouraging that your course is very well recognized, and of course, it's a part of your curriculum. But if it is possible for us to participate and deliver some courses, some programs for the whole of Asia Pacific region, it will be very interesting. And thank you so much again for a very interesting presentation. Now, I'll request Ms. Li and Lai, she from the NBS China, to make her presentation regarding the talent forecasting, talent need, which is a very important area in the statistics.
Okay.
So please stick to 10 minutes guideline. Thank you.
Okay. Now can you see the slide? Okay, now let's begin. Hello everyone, I'm so glad here to share my paper, Research on Optimization of Statistical Talent Development. And here are the contents. It has 5 parts. And first, let's start with the introduction. My research focused on the NBS of China, and which consists of administrative departments, non-administrative department, and survey offices in all provinces. The study, and here let's see the agency structure. And the study involved more than 18,000 employees, and among them, there are about 1,000 in the administrative and non-administrative department, which constitutes the leading organ. And then the other 17 employees in the survey offices in our provinces. And here are some simple statistic data. You can see. Then let's go to the problem that we face. One is age structure imbalance and talent loss. In terms of age structure imbalance, there are two obvious problems: aging leadership and shortage of middle-aged. And in terms of talent loss, because the career development prospect or salary cannot meet the expectation, leading to some young employees choosing to leave. Then the second problem, narrow career channel. To some extent, the specialization limits the talent results in the limitation of personnel pool, and the pyramid structure of positions limits many capable talents development, especially in the grassroots. Then the third one, incompleting training system. On the whole, our country's training system is not bad, but the backward ways and contents still exist. And at the same time, the training need of grassroots need to be further met. And the fourth one, shortage of high-end and urgently needed talent. On the one hand, the number of the high-end talents is not enough, and on the other hand, the way to explore and foster high-end talent is not enough. Then I just summarize the problems and the impact. Let's see the picture. To solve these problems, we plan to try from 4 aspects. And the first, about the age structure and talent loss problem. First, analysis and judgment. We can use personnel information such as annual report, monthly report, personnel information system to conduct analysis regularly to find out the shortcomings and timely put forward countermeasures. Then we can increase the proportion of middle-aged and young in the leadership and accelerate the growth of the young into backbone to solve the problem of aging leadership and shortage of middle-aged. Then return talents. Because the salary of civil servants cannot be easily changed, so the key goal for us will be improve the job erection and broaden the career development platform. Use the way, for example, use the way of important post practice, spiritual rewards, and some other ways. And by these ways, we can see some change is happening now. Okay, let's do the next one. About the career channel problem. First, improve the talent flow. It includes two parts. The first one is improve the internal flow across departments, regions, and different levels. And at the same time, we should pay attention to the bottom-up selection from the grassroots. Then, we should make full use of the existing policy, such as parallel system of post and rank. This policy explains the number and layers of non-leading positions and establish a dual-channel career path, increase the opportunity of promotion, making the professional employees have larger space to rise. Then the third one, flexible introduction. On the one hand, we can attract external talents for use and not through employment. On the other hand, we should recommend internal talents to the outside. Then we can see the results. And then the third one about the training system problem. First, we should establish a classified and hierarchical training plan and optimize optimize training methods. And we can set up different training for different stages of talent development to improve their ability to perform their duties. The system includes introduction training, position holding training, advanced training, professional training, international training, and so on. Then we should strengthen the development of young talents, because the young is the hope of the future. So it's very important to train them up from the aspects of ideology, ability, attitude, creativity, and some other fields. Then foster talents in multi ways. Besides training, we have some other ways to foster talents, such as take on important work, assume a temporary post, to the grassroots, international short-term work, and some other ways. Then we can see the results. Here, the 5-year training plan. Its goal is to allow everyone can get the training that suits them within 5 years. And here's the other. Okay, let's go to the fourth one, about the high-end talent problem. First, we should improve the evaluation system. Talent evaluation is an effective tool to selection the talent. So we must improve our ability to select and identify those who hold potential. The tool we can use include professional title system, talent project, and some other means. Then we should build a higher and broader platform for the high-end talent to give full play of their role and expand their influence. Then to increase the number of the high-end talents, we should use both internal potential typing and external wisdom introduction. And here we have a good demonstration which called Chief Statistician as a senior talent project to foster high-end talents. And here the results we can see. Above methods are from different parts of the talent development, and I tried to build an optimized talent development path which combine the talent selection, youth training, motivation, and find a more clear path for the talent growth. Now let's see the path. It's a path from the new recruit to the highest level that he can reach. From here, the talents will be distinguished to 2 ways. One is manager, the other is expert, and there will be different way for them to grow. And for the manager, the goal will be to become an excellent leader, and for the experts, the goal will be top expert. And of course, we would like to see more and more compound talents emerge. And in this model, I use different colors to represent different ways of talent cultivation. Then let's go to the last part, this conclusion. First, I think we should pay attention to the match between the needs of statistical reform and development of talents. Then the second, we should build a systematic, differentiated, and chain fostering mode to foster talent. Then is a mission of human resource managers with open and inclusive thinking to build an arena for talents. And so that's all for my presentation today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lee and Lai. This has been a very interesting presentation where you have brought out the issues relating to development of talent, fostering them, identifying them, and then giving them due recognition in the whole system of the national statistical offices. This is very important because many times we find the talents move away the moment they grow up, and then they go outside because there are greener pastures in the private sector where the people get far more money than what they get in the government systems. So it is very interesting and very important. Now I'll request Jan Smith, our partner, to ask if there are any specific questions relating to the three presenters. All the presentations have been very good. I'll leave it to Mr. Jan to ask questions.
Yes, thank you, Ashish. So we got one question up till now, which is, I think, for either Henriette or Kristen. Do the surveys mentioned cover emotional abuse? And then the question continues by asking, would it be more difficult to get unbiased data on emotional abuse, I suppose vis-a-vis other forms of violence?
You go ahead, Henriette.
It's a very good question. I mean, we didn't really talk about how the surveys worked. We talked about interviewer training and training for collecting data on violence against women. So that would be an entire new session. But how you collect the data on violence against women, the first principle is actually we do not use the word violence anywhere in the entire survey, not in the name of the survey, but also not in the questions. So whether we measure physical violence, sexual violence, emotional violence, or any type of violence, we do not leave anything up to the interpretation of the interviewer or the respondent. So questions are being asked by asking very specifically about behavioral acts. Like for physical, that's simple. Have you ever been slapped, kicked, beaten, strangled, choked, burned, etc.? Use of a weapon. For sexual, we have acts. For emotional, we also have acts. And we measure more types of violence than only physical or sexual. But often in the, I'll come back to the emotional in a minute, but often in the reporting, we combine physical and or sexual as an indicator because we have more robust ways to measure that in an internationally comparable way. Indeed, the person asking the question would realize, yes, emotional violence will be harder because it can be more cultural specific. But we do measure it across surveys by asking about very specific behavioral acts also, and they include humiliating, belittling. There are a number of things like destroying things she likes, or threatening her, or threatening somebody she cares about. So there are very, very specific questions to determine whether the woman has suffered emotional violence from a partner. And the same, we have a set of questions on controlling behaviors, because in how the SDGs measure psychological violence, it combines emotional violence, which is the belittling, the humiliating, and controlling behavior, which is more wanting to know all the time what she's doing, being extremely jealous, and really controlling her life. So these aspects are all being measured in a violence against women survey, plus many other types of violence as well, not only intimate partner violence. But just, saying how it's measured. Thank you.
Ms. Teemer, do you want to further supplement on the points which Ms. Jensen has?
Yeah, I'll just add something a little bit about measuring psychological abuse or emotional abuse. This is where it's particularly important to involve people from the local country and the context, so that you've got you can get context around what emotional violence looks like in that context. Sorry, I'm repeating myself. So in framing those questions, we will work with the people from the local country so they can come up with examples of what would be a controlling behavior perhaps in that country. And so part of the course is teaching the participants how to adapt the questionnaire. So you don't change the questionnaire so it's still comparable internationally, but there are some things that you may need to adapt for that local context. This is a good example. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think then we have a question for Ms. Lee and Lai. Could you elaborate and share your experience on how to do bottom-up selection and flexible introduction to career development and talent?
Please unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
I think we should build a system that we can let the outstanding talents of the grassroots can stand out and make the higher level can see the best ones and to build a way for them to go to the higher level. For example, we can hire some employees for a short term to work in the higher level department, and then after a period, we can just introduct him or her to the department and return them by employment.
Okay, thank you.
Then we have one more question, which is a rather broad question, and I'm not quite sure whether we can fully answer this within the context of this particular session. So I'll ask you, Ashish, to maybe say something about this. How do bureaucracy and politics affect national statistical systems?
Thank you, Jan, for the participant who has asked this question. It is always a very critical question, the impact of politics and the bureaucracy on the national statistics. There are statistics which are critical, and there are statistics which are making different positions which the governments take. Even in the existing crisis which is going on the COVID-19, if all of us are so much concerned about it, and we see the numbers every day on daily basis, and there is always a criticism from the opposition that the numbers which are being shown are not the true picture of the infection which is floating around, or even the deaths which are being reported. So there is a very close link between the statistics and the politics or the bureaucracy. You can't separate it, you can't remove it. But yes, by creating a system by which you can sort of ensure that the statisticians are allowed to work independently and continue to report without fear whatever data they feel is the right. And that is based on statistical principles, the international standards, and the standards set for that country. And therefore, there is always an interaction, and there is always need for a high-level support for doing it, and many times it is available. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then one more question. I think it should be the last, since we have to move on. Again, this is for either Henriette or Kristen. Do you get support from psychologists when you train interviewers? For example,
go ahead, Henriette.
We can probably split this up among us again, which is really nice because we always complement each other. I want to say there's two things in this question. There is the support from the psychologists and for controlling, facial expression and so on. Psychologists are usually needed, or counselors or whatever, and they play a multiple role. They play a role in the training, they play a role in giving support to the field teams, but sometimes also to women who need support. And maybe Kristen can say a bit more about that. But I felt actually compelled to say something about controlling the facial expressions. And this is like people who are trained by national statistics are always trained to be very neutral and to not show emotions. And we sometimes, I mean, that's why we often prefer to work with unexperienced enumerators, because we have to train interviewers to be empathic. And that means, you know, not imposing yourself, not being, not giving comments, but it's really being quiet and silent and doing active listening, showing that you value the story. And we often get the question, can an interviewer cry? Because they learn from statistics, you don't cry. I mean, that's what I've heard, if you get a sad story. But, you know, these interviewers get to hear very, very sad stories, very painful stories, very hard stories, very difficult stories. And when it comes to this crying, and it almost always come up, and I've trained thousands and thousands of interviewers, I just say, feel free to cry, but tell the woman, like, I cry easily, but don't get affected by me crying, because you should make sure that the woman doesn't feel responsible for your well-being and your happiness, and feel responsible for make you crying. But very often crying and being empathic and not making it overly emotional helps that rapport and helps getting the story. So I personally, I mean, I cry easily, and I've seen when asking questions to people, I mean, you just cry and stay still and say, don't stop, go on, let me be, and it's your story that makes me, you know, very emotional. It actually is, it's not an interviewing skill, but it doesn't need to disturb the interview or the data collection. I would say to the contrary.
Thank you. I think in the interest of time, we should move on with the rest of the session, Ashish.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much to all the presenters, and very kindly agreeing to respond to the very important questions which have come. Now, the second part of this session is a discussion, a panel discussion. We had a brief introduction of what I have been talking about is the Sustainable Development Goals, and the whole session is around in terms of strengthening people's building capacities, bringing up the talent, and the training them very well for delivering their jobs. Now I'll ask 3 questions, one by one to each panelist, and then would request a brief answer, to the point answer to each one of them. After that, I will open this discussion for questions from the participants. The first question is, what kind of guidance material and training is required for SDGs under the 2030 agenda? I'll request Ms. Dr. Jensen to respond to it. Her perspective of all.
Yeah, I think, you know, we are in the age of the SDGs, the 2030 agenda, since 5 years. And violence against women is still, for most NSOs, a relatively new area. So measuring sensitive issues has not traditionally been their business. But the SDGs require that they should change the way to work. And we do have these guidance materials. We have now 20 years of experience. It won't happen overnight, but with the course that Kristen talked about, the mentoring and the political will, we know it's possible. But I also want to just make one point, that it doesn't only go, it's not only about data collection skills. I think our guidance also refers to the moral and ethical obligation to ensure that the data we are collecting is adding value. So not only not jeopardizing women's safety, but we need the data to be actionable, to be reliable, and to be used. So just, I want to say that the guidance that we give goes beyond the technical skills. It's about data use, data translation, and an important component will be also on the data literacy and the participatory processes with users and producers, and the workshopping of results, make sure that the data is properly understood, the story that the data tells us and the story that it doesn't tell us. There's so much more to say, but I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jansen. That's a very, very interesting and very thoughtful comment on this question, because we always keep struggling with how much material and what kind of training is most appropriate for us to bring that change which we need in the national statistical systems. So, and this is all the more important because of the SDGs. When we are talking about SDGs, this has become all the more important, various dimensions and various issues, and very, very complicated ones, as one you have referred to. Now I'll move to the second question, which is to Ms. Deemer. How the country ensures availability of skill set in generation of statistical products and services for monitoring national development plans and 2030 agenda.
Well, thank you, Ashish. Because the course that I've been speaking about works with multiple countries, I thought to answer this question, I'd give you a few examples from the participants of the course. So for example, in 2018, we had some participants from Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was planning to conduct a prevalence survey during 2019. They were able to send 3 people to participate, and 2 of them were from the National Statistics Office, and 1 of them was from the UNFPA country office, who was going to be supporting overall the survey implementation. The skills they gained during the course, as well as their links with other course participants, enabled them to be very confident that they could undertake the whole study. They were able to lead the planning, the questionnaire programming, enumerator training, and the data analysis, and they're in the middle of analysis right now. At some points, the team needed to hire either national or international consultants, and I think what the course also gave them was the confidence to know what they could do, what skill sets they had within their teams, and where they might have had gaps when they needed to contract additional support. And so then that allowed them to continue to build those skills across either their teams or to bring other people in. The second example is from Vietnam, and Vietnam will give a paper tomorrow on their study, but they conducted their first prevalence survey in 2010. And I think they're going to be talking about how that data has then been used. And the second one was completed in 2019, and they're still finishing up the reporting on that, and hopefully it should be launched by the end of the month, we hope. 2 people from Vietnam attended the 2018 course, one from the National Statistics Office. She also had led the 2010 survey. And another person from the UNFPA country office, who again would be supporting the management of the study. So even though we had a participant who'd worked on the 2010 survey already, it was very beneficial for her to think about, well, how are we going to conduct the second study, and so that we can have maximum comparison between the 2. And then having the UNFPA person there to sort of extend that knowledge and learning. They both bring those skills back and work then to select their teams and how they're going to involve stakeholders, and particularly the peer-to-peer learning in their own teams, but also from other people in the course. They were able to draw from knowledge there, and they were also able to share their knowledge. So particularly having worked in a 2010 survey, she was able to share that knowledge and learning with other participants in the course. And that helps build our community of practice. So as we go forward, we're building this network of people across the region who are then contacting each other to ask for support or share knowledge. And the other thing that I'll just quickly mention is that what we stress in the course is how each of the survey teams should engage local stakeholders and national data users, so that they don't just go back with a survey and a report and nobody uses it. So all the way through the process, they should have engagement from their local data users so that they can have appropriate communication of those results and reporting at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very insightful and very useful suggestions, and also sharing of very good experiences in terms of how you manage it and how you have the kind of skill set which is required for the purpose of organizing a statistical business process. You have given a very good example of bringing in people and engaging them well in advance along with the conduct of the survey, so that they also are aware of what is happening. Now, the third question, which goes to Mr. Lee in Lai, is how the countries assure capable management and sufficiency of human resources for continuous generation of statistical products. Because this is your area, so you should be giving us the thoughts to the people. How should we really go about it? Please, go ahead.
Okay, and just as I just mentioned in my presentation, to improve the skill acquisition of the statistician of our country, we should first pay attention to the match between the statistical reform and the development of talents in the new era. And the government statistics requires use and cultivation of talents to grasp the most cutting-edge statistical methods, and we should maintain the thinking and ability to continuous learning. And this requires wise decision-making by the leadership and timely planning by the human resource department, and decisive execution by the executive department. And then we should build a systematic, differentiated, and chain-fostering mode for the talents. Here, the systematic means to combine the parts of the talent fostering, and the use of these parts should be around the talent development and work together. For example, for the talents who are about to promote it to the leading positions of professional department, they can not only acquire management ability through post practice, but also need to enhance professional knowledge by professional training. Then here the differentiated refers to targeted cultivation of talent. And in space, there will be a variety of ways to cultivate talent at the same time. And in terms of time, different training means should be set at different stage of talent development. And here the chain means a clear path, a clear development path, just like I showed in the fourth part. And at present, there's less vertical cultivation planning that runs through one's career, and so we can help every new recruit from the beginning to design their career path and according to the individual situation to make up for shortcomings and give full play to the advantage. And because I am worked in the personnel department, we should to build an arena for the talents, and the talents need to flow to generate vitality, and we should give the opportunity for them to flow and fully tapping potential. Maybe also an effective driving force. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your insightful comments, and they are very relevant for the purpose of not only overall skill development, especially the capable management, which is important. Capable management has to be with a real effort in doing it. It is not just comes because you have been there in the system for a long time. Does not necessarily bring in, but somebody has to identify the skills and then take them. That's so very kind of you. That's very good, very interesting comment. Thank you so much to all of you. I'll be now requesting Jan to see if there are any questions on this panel discussions from the participants. Jan? Hello, Jan.
And I was on mute, of course.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
I don't see many questions. There is a question to you from a colleague in Lao PDR. SIAP contributed to building statistic systems for a very long time. However, the needs of the NSO still haven't been totally fulfilled. So how? What are your suggestions to NSOs in this respect?
Thank you so much, Jan. That's a very interesting question and very important question. And the Statistical Institute has been there for almost 50 years. We have about 21,000 people trained, and still we find that there is a lack of adequate skills in the countries, and there's always demand for more and more training programs. For some regions, of course, they are slightly less covered, like Pacific, like if you look at Central Asia, Jan is working with us to help us in doing some training programs for the Central Asia, and also in the other parts, like Lao PDR has raised this issue. This is a continuous process. This is a process which will never stop. And only thing what we have to do as a SIAP is to expand the coverage, bring more partnerships. We are working with the partners in various countries, like Korea has a statistical institute. We partner with them on some particular courses. Similarly, we have partners with Indonesia, we have partners with Malaysia, we have partners in other countries where we do provide a kind of a support and help in developing more trainers, because these trainers have to be in the countries. And if we have sufficient number of trainers in the countries, then they can further multiply and use this knowledge which they are getting through the training programs which the Institute is providing. So that's one strategy we work on. And we bring a lot of partners. I have been bringing in, for gender issues, we have talked to the UN Women, and UN Women has come forward to organize a lot of training programs in the whole of the region. Similarly, we have been doing earlier programs with the FAO. We have been doing programs with the ILO and the UN Statistics Division. Of course, UNFPA is also most welcome to join, and we will be very happy, and the Ministry and the Australia, and even China. We will be very happy to do training programs with the International Institute of National NBS of China, where we can organize. But our problems, just like in Central Asia and in China, is the language, because most of our training programs are in English language, and there has to be somebody to interpret the material, somebody to convert the material. That is what we do in the case of Central Asia. Russians have come, Russian Federation people have come with us, and we have an institute there, Higher School of Economics. They work with us to convert the material which is developed by SIAP in the local language of Russian, and then it is circulated and given to all of them. So that there are opportunities, and there's a lot of more work to be done. That's how I look at it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? We still have 5 minutes. You can also raise your hand if you want to, or type your question in the meeting chat. It seems that there are no more questions, Ashish.
Okay, so what we will do
to wrap it up.
Yeah, we have just last 5 minutes. Any one of you have any pressing things to say now, or I just summarize and finish it off? Anybody?
I think go ahead with the letter, Ashish.
Yeah. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank all the participants who have joined this session. I would like to thank the presenters, each one of them with their special skills and knowledge. They have contributed to a very important task, that is what kind of skills we need in the 21st century. And we are not leaving away the old skills of the interviewing. We need a special set of skills for interviewing, because this has been a great challenge. I mean, all my initial career, I was a survey statistician. And the biggest challenge all the time has been to get the correct data from the interviewee. And when you go to such a specialized area where you are talking of such a sensitive subject of women and especially the violence against women, it becomes so difficult. And every time I used to listen when I was a manager there that my enumerators were being beaten, asking such questions which are very sensitive and very, very difficult to handle. So for such surveys, we made a first principle: you should always take a women enumerator only, and no male enumerators are allowed. That's first question. The second question is a lot of rigorous training of these women enumerators, because it is not easy. Normal statistical fraternity, the kind of training which we give, as rightly pointed out, more kind of a neutrality, that you are not putting words in the mouth of the enumerator, the interviewee. So you have to be careful in terms of asking questions. That is what has been trained. So you have to be more neutral. But here, when you are going to such a sensitive area of questioning, it becomes all the more difficult that you maintain the neutrality, but you be part of it. Because unless the person who is being interviewed identifies with you, will not be able to share this information. So the basic issue in these circumstances is a further greater level of training. And I think Australia is doing a great job by organizing it as a part of their curriculum. And this is the only way forward, and especially on these sensitive questions. And this is not only on the violence. There are many other areas in the social domain where you need to do it. Well, the statistical offices have to change. We have been seeing that they have to bring new skills. They have to bring new skill sets. It is not so simple. It is not. It has to become more open, because most of the statistical offices, they become some kind of a closed systems. They only look at the existing talent which is within them. What is needed is to be a little more open, bring diverse areas of the talent in the system and use them. And it has to be very specific to that. If we can bring that kind of a change, we will have the right skill set for bringing about that kind of a change which we are looking forward to. The third thing is the technology has made a lot of difference. We all have to keep on remembering every time that the internet, the digital revolution, and increasingly more so, if you look at all credit transactions, all cash transactions, all social transactions, they are all become digital. And the national statistical offices have to capture it to see that they are able to really take full advantage of the system. Therefore, the cost of data collection will go down, cost of analysis will go down, and the things which they will say will be more easily understood by the people at large. And for that requires a real talent hunt. So what Lee and Lai has been doing is talent hunting. That talent hunt is required to make the national statistical systems really an effective instrument to deliver both to the governments and also to the citizens at large. These are all my final comments, and I will again like to thank each one of you who has participated, who has presented, and Jan Smith, who has helped us in organizing. And also I would not like to miss Ing, who has been an administrative coordinator from ESCAP to support the whole of this activity. Thank you so much. Very kind of you. Have a great day.